Welcome to Side C of this little series on Series 11. And in this video I want to talk about something that happened in The Witchfinders, which I think has to be my least favourite of the series so far, and in part because of this thing that I want to talk about. So early in the episode there was an exchange between Becca and the Doctor where Becca quotes the King James Version of the Bible, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," and the Doctor's response is, that's in the Old Testament, but in the sequel we have "Love thy neighbour." And that is a massively problematic exchange for several reasons. The first reason is that, at best, that's a very misleading statement from the Doctor, and at worst, it's just wrong. Yes, "love thy neighbour," in modern translations, "love your neighbour as yourself," appears in the New Testament quite a number of times, but in each and every case, it's quoting the Old Testament, specifically the book of Leviticus, where "love your neighbour as yourself" originally appears. Leading on from that, and I have Mark Goodacre to thank for this particular perspective, this is the way he tweeted it, is to say that, firstly, this is an anti-Jewish sentiment. This is something that has been perpetrated by the Christian church over the years, and I think has permeated wider culture. The idea that the God of the Old Testament is the nasty, horrible one with all these rules about killing people and stuff, and that Jesus and the New Testament God is much more light and fluffy. And it's just not true, because, as we've said, "love thy neighbour" originates in the Old Testament. If you've not read the Bible, then I can understand why these simple kind of cultural perspectives might have affected your thinking. But as with most things in life, the reality is just a lot more complicated. Yes, there are difficult things to grapple with in the Old Testament, or if you're Jewish, the entirety of your scriptures. But equally, there are difficult things to grapple with in the New. And basically, it makes the Doctor look ignorant. And I don't like the Doctor looking ignorant, because she's supposed to be the hero of the show. So that casts a bad light over the whole thing. And leading on from that, if you do then concern yourself with the New Testament, where this phrase is quoted, the Doctor just plucking it out and saying, "love thy neighbour," completely removes it from the context in which it appears in the New Testament, which is largely in conversations that Jesus has with people, where he either asks them what's the important stuff about the law, and then agrees with them that they've got it right, or he quotes it himself. But the point being that the whole of the Old Testament law hinges on this verse. So that includes all the difficult stuff, including the "thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." And I know there are potential issues with the translation of that. I don't want to go into that here. You can look that up if you want, as to what the word that's translated "witch" actually means. I'm not qualified to comment on that. If you are a biblical scholar, you can probably dive in the comments. But it basically gives the lie to the idea that Jesus is this nice, fluffy, good teacher, the kind of person that you can embrace if you're a secular humanist, because if you want to do that, you have to ignore a whole bunch of stuff that he says, including the context of "love thy neighbour," because it's quite clear from the New Testament that Jesus was very much on board with the Old Testament scriptures. So if you want to be on board with Jesus, you have to be at least prepared to grapple with that stuff, even if you end up disagreeing with him. The bigger question that this throws up for me comes from just quoting the Bible full stop. So let's get beyond the controversy of the fact that the Doctor completely cocked this one up. Doctor Who has largely shied away from engaging with Christianity specifically. Clearly it's entered various historical contexts in which the main religion is Christianity. But in terms of actually specifically quoting the Bible, that happens very, very rarely. The Doctor quoting the Bible, as far as I know, and people can correct me in the comments, this is only the second time that it's happened. The first being Paul McGann's Regeneration, when he quotes Jesus quoting a proverb of the day. So it's not even the Doctor quoting Jesus, really. And I think for me, if a Doctor Who story goes there, that immediately opens up a whole can of worms about just the nature of reality. Because as a Christian, I believe that we exist because God exists. But if you then take a TV show which, whilst not entirely nailing its colours to the mast, has largely suggested that a monotheistic God does not exist, that the highest powers we've ever come across in the universe of Doctor Who are the black and white Guardian, which is much more of an Eastern yin-yang, good and evil equal, not even good and evil necessarily, order and chaos possibly. That's the highest power in the Doctor Who universe. But it's a universe that acknowledges the history of our planet, as we've talked about before. That then, in my thinking, makes the Doctor Who universe impossible, like logically impossible. Because if we are here because God is here, and the history that we know happened because we're in a universe that God created, and that universes can only exist because God already existed, then any universe that fails to acknowledge God, or specifically deny the existence of God, end up being impossible. And this is probably me overthinking it. This is my new brand, Luke Overthinks. And I'm happy to embrace the fact, yes, it's fiction, so we can technically do what we want. But at the same time, if Christianity is true, then a universe where God doesn't exist is impossible. And we can't even imagine what that would be like. Now, obviously, if you don't believe, then you believe we live in that universe where the Christian history exists without a God. But I don't believe that, and so it comes up with this conundrum for me, really. And it also then reminds you of the fact that the Doctor would know. It's a place that the show can't go, but in reality, the Doctor would know. The Doctor would have been able to visit first century Palestine and check out the birth of Jesus, as David Tennant alluded to in Voyage of the Damned. That's potentially problematic, but I don't want to go there. And also Easter in Planet of the Dead. The Doctor has suggested that she is aware of these things and could have visited and would know the truth of it. And therefore, in my opinion, the Doctor would know the truth of Jesus' death and resurrection, and should therefore be some form of Christian. But that isn't apparent from the show. Do let me know what you think in the comments, whether that was a ridiculous ramble or not, whether you think I've made a good argument or a good point. That would be lovely to know. Thanks for watching. If you haven't seen the other 2 videos in this series, there are links here to click on and a playlist for you to catch up on all of them in one go if you so choose. Please do subscribe and like the video.